Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar on mapping Black burial grounds. I am Lachey Oubre, and I am the Director and Community Outreach Coordinator for Anson Street African Burial Ground Project.
Thanks,
Joanna.
Lachey, and I'm Joanna Gilmore, and I'm the Director of Research and Interpretation for the Anson Street Burial Ground Project. And we're excited to be partnering with the Preservation Society on this Mapping Black Burial Grounds project.
And my name is Anna Catherine Carroll, Manager of Preservation Initiatives with the Preservation Society of Charleston. Thanks so much to everyone for joining us today.
Mm-hmm. So, shall I go ahead? So today we're just going to go over making sure that you understand who we are, an introduction to the project overall, where the money's come from, what it will be allocated to, the timeline, how we've worked in the past on such sites and why it's so important that we have a map for burial grounds that can be accessible by the community as well as the planning department from the city side of things. And then we'll, as Anna Catherine said earlier, once we've finished our conversation, we'll make sure that we allow time for us to answer any questions that you have, or for you to share any information you'd like to about burial grounds that are meaningful for you.
But that part will not be recorded.
Mm-hmm. So the Mapping Burial Grounds project is funded by the National Park Service, and it's a collaborative effort to identify and document Black burial sites in the city. So that includes James and Johns Island, West Ashley, Charleston Peninsula, and parts of Daniel Island and Cane Hoy that are within the city limits. And the aim is to create a comprehensive map of burial grounds so that these sacred sites can be defended from development. So it's a starting place, really, to enforce the legislation that was passed, the Burial Grounds Ordinance that passed in the city in 2021. This will give them, the planning department at least, the ways to make sure that development won't affect documented burial grounds. So the project partners, the Preservation Society applied for the grant with it's a African American Action Funds grant with the National Park Service, and then they partnered with Lachey and I as representatives of the Anson Street African Burial Ground Project to work together, and partners that assisted with the grant application and support this project include the International African American Museum, the City of Charleston's Mayor's Office, and the City of Charleston Planning Department. So I think I've said that about where the funding came from. And it was a $50,000 grant. I'll let Anna Catherine describe the Preservation Society.
Yes, thank you, Joanna. And just to give a quick overview of the Preservation Society of Charleston is one of the lead project partners. If you're not familiar with our organization or our work, we are a nonprofit organization. We are located in downtown Charleston. However, our scope and reach is regional. Our mission is to preserve the quality of life and the unique landscapes and cultural heritage of not only Charleston, but the Lowcountry region. It's also important to know that we are a membership-based organization. And so everything that we do is intended to be grassroots and based in connectivity with the community and with our members.
And here we have the history of Anson Street Burial Ground. The gentleman that you see is Dr. Adeo Funian, who is now one of the honorable ancestors. He began Gullah Society, and after his passing, Gullah Society closed down, and the Anson Street the team from Gullah Society, the scientific team, decided that this work was really too important to not continue, and we're now continuing to work under Anson Street African Burial Ground Project. Our other partners are Dr. Thaddeus Shore and Dr. Raquel Flesquez. The picture that you see here was May 4th, 2019. This is when we reinterred the 36 ancestors that are now laid to rest on the corner of George and Anson Street behind the Gilliard Auditorium. Historically about that is when the Gilliard was doing its renovation, they found 36 ancestors laid to rest there. And the Gullah Society decided that the 36 ancestors should be returned together and back at the site from which they were reinterred. So they were reinterred on that day with a community ceremony of over 300 people, community participants led by Watoto Dance Academy of Charleston, the Ojotunji African Village Masquerade Party, the King and Queen of the Ojotunji Village, the Caribbean coordinators and participants from, along with Lorna Beck, the Native Americans from the Edisto Indians, the, help me out, Joe, Keepers of the Faith, and other participants. We have Reverend Hill from St. John's Episcopal Church, who has been a founding member of this project ever since it began. And the College of Charleston, we started there and we processed down George Street. And the College of Charleston has been a wonderful participant and activist. It's part of this project also.
So this map on this slide, you can see this is one of the early projects that we worked on as Gullah Society. And in this, maybe you can recognize where we are. So we got I-26 to the kind of left side of the screen, and then King Street, Upper King Street extension, and the Charleston Fire Department is right there with the new Pacific Box and Crate development next to it. So this is the part of the neck that we already know as being an area with a lot of cemeteries, and there's Magnolia Cemetery and all of the cemeteries that are well preserved over on the east side of the neck. But these cemeteries that are on alongside I-26 and King Street extension, the African descendant burial grounds, you can see that they're coloured in here with the different squares. And on Monrovia Street, you can see Zion, and then it says EFG. So there's 4 burial grounds on that street there. And in the photographs you can see on the right corner, you can see Dr. O. And this was when we were trying to clear the site and make sure that we documented the burial grounds there. So some of the threats that we see a lot, threats to burial ground include development, climate change. So we've seen in the news the flooding that has affected burial grounds, a lack of documentation in terms of awareness of past cemeteries or cemeteries that might be located on plantations that never had the kind of maps that we might see in the city location. And then because of the great migration, there's been a disconnect between older burial grounds and people living today. Also because of gentrification, people moving from churches, African-American churches in downtown to further into North Charleston, for instance, like the Mount Zion Presbyterian Church. So they've lost that connection, and actually the congregation and the pastor there at Mount Zion Oliver on Rivers Avenue didn't even realize that this was a burial ground associated with their church. If we go to the next slide, you can see the same area. This is on the City of Charleston MapNet, where you can find all kinds of information about the tax numbers for different properties, for instance. And this is a map where you can see the future land use for the same area, and they've color coded this map for planning purposes to see which areas could be future potential development. And so you can see on the right corner, you've got Cunnington Avenue, and it's all green over there, so you know that it's a conservation area, and those are the burial grounds that are already protected. But on Monrovia Street, the 3 burial grounds adjacent to Zion are blue, and so they're marked for job centre or industrial area. So we can see that already, and this is in the present time, these burial grounds aren't currently protected. So that's why this map is so very important, so that those sites won't be developed in the future. So typically when we're dealing with burial grounds, we go through a process. The first is to make sure that we engage the community. It's very important to us that we connect with the people, the descendants of the people, or the friends of those interred, because those are the stewards, the caretakers of those burial grounds today. And our priority is to work with those communities and the wishes of the community and whatever decisions are made about the burial ground. And typically a site will be first mapped and surveyed to make sure you establish the extent of the burial ground and the number of burials located within it, because sometimes the markers aren't visible. It might be burials just defined by depressions in the ground, or objects like bottles or shells, for instance. And then we'll make an inventory of all the burials, and which allows genealogists to do more research as well, and so that people can make more connections with their family histories. And then the next phase is really removing vegetation that might be damaging burials, repairing and conserving damaged grave markers, and then providing recommendations or advice or capacity building to community members to assist with the ongoing maintenance of these sites. And then an overall mission really is to promote interest in the importance of African descendant burial grounds and the stories they hold for all communities, really, and so that these sites are valued as vital assets in communities.
So just a few notes on overall project goals and project logistics, timeline, things like that, just for clarity's sake. So we've stated this, but to really cut to the point, the main goal of this project is to engage community members to identify and document African American burial sites in the city of Charleston. Joanna explained this earlier, but it is limited to the city of Charleston, although we do hope that this is a process that can in turn be replicated by other municipalities, not only in the region, but across the country. And ultimately, the fruit of that exercise would be the creation of a citywide map of burial sites that would that the city of Charleston planning department would have access to ensure better protection of these sites against development impacts. So anytime a request would come forward, the city would then, a request for development would come forward, the city would have access to this map to cross-check and to be able to prevent harmful impacts to burial grounds. And what that would do would improve implementation of ordinances and protections that the city already has on the books to defend burial grounds. And we'll get into this in more detail and provide you with some resources on how to read more about existing protections. But the city of Charleston currently has a cemetery protection ordinance that allows for, if any person comes forward and produces information about known or probable burials on a site, the city of Charleston can issue a stop work order if development is happening, to make sure that no harm is done to burial grounds before development continues. But that's hard to do proactively if there's not a comprehensive inventory of burial grounds to reference. So that's another benefit of having this map at the ready. And ultimately, we hope that this process and these conversations will strengthen collaboration and trust between descendant communities, residents, preservation organizations like the Preservation Society, and city officials, so that we can all work together and be on the same page about the importance of protecting burial grounds in the future. And so just a couple of notes on what the $50,000 grant can support and what it can't. So community engagement, of course, the process of identifying and documenting burial grounds, the actual mapping of these sites in a digital format that would then be accessible by city staff, and then education and training. So sessions like this one that could be brought into different communities to help them not only better understand this mapping project, but some of the other really practical steps that Joanna outlined a couple of slides ago about how to care for burial grounds long-term. And then we would love to see the younger generation engaged in this project, so funds can support internships. We're hoping to have one of those open in the spring. So if you know of anybody who would be a good fit to help take what we are learning during this community engagement process and actually see it implemented on a map, we would love to hear from you. And a couple of things that the grant funds unfortunately can't support, but are still important, are gravestone repair and conservation, landscaping and long-term maintenance of sites, and then things like acquisition of land to ensure their preservation or legal action that may be necessary. And then lobbying is also not allowed as part of this process. And where we've been and where we're going. So after receiving the grant, our teams have been in a research and project planning phase up until the launch of the initial listening session phase, which kicked off this summer. And we had 3 in-person listening sessions throughout the city of Charleston, one for James and Johns Island, one on the Cainhoy Peninsula, and one downtown to allow for better access for West Ashley and Peninsula residents. But everyone was welcome at any of those sessions, but we just tried to spread it out to make access easier. And then now we're wrapping up tonight with this virtual session, but the conversations are only going to continue. Like Joanna said, this is just the beginning. And so through the end of the year, we'll be following up with residents and community members who have shared information about burial sites that are important to them that should be included as part of this project. And then into next year, working from that information, we'll be working together with community members to actually build this map that will then in turn be a preservation tool. And we, like we said, hope to have an intern come alongside us to help that process along. And we look forward to coming back to the community to share the draft map before anything is final, to make sure that what is represented is what the community feels most comfortable with.
Yeah, so this is just an idea of what a map might look like. So these blue dots here you can see could be burial grounds scattered throughout the whole of Charleston County. And then whenever you want to look up information about that particular burial ground, whether it's the name, the dates of that burial ground, the specific location, you could access it on the map here through this online map.
And this is a helpful visual, but one to just to clarify, this is just meant to indicate how this could appear, because what we're seeing here actually goes beyond the city of Charleston, but it's just to represent how a resource like this might look moving forward.
But also the importance of this map is that it will also be accessible to the community. Not only the city, but to all of us, that we will be able to see where our loved ones are mapped, and that for generations to come after us, that they will be able to know that where loved ones are, and so that they can also help in the long run, make sure that the grounds are protected.
Mhm. Yeah, so at the end of our listening sessions, or the end of our our initial presentation to you all, we at the various locations that we've been doing in-person listening sessions, we've had these maps up in the room. So with burial grounds that we're already aware of, marked out, and then we've asked community members to add any burial grounds to those maps, and to just talk about the burial grounds that are already known about, to discuss issues like how accessible that particular burial ground is, whether it's threatened by development. And Lachey can perhaps share a story about a burial ground that she recently visited in Cane Hoy, that has definitely raised some questions and helped us to rethink about things that we can bring to the city to change about the burial ground ordinance.
A couple of weeks I was asked to go with a person to a burial ground that was called McDowell's Burial Ground in on Highway 41 in Mount Pleasant, Cane Hoy area. When we got there, there's a development in this Oak Haven, Oak Brook
It's
subdivision.
Oak Bluff development,
Oak
yeah.
Bluff subdivision. And just as you come in to the right, you see the graveyard. But around the graveyard, you see all of these houses are being built. And there's a fence around the graveyard. And we spent 2 hours out there walking and researching. So historically, inside the graveyard are a lot of Caucasian descendants. And outside the graveyard are African.
I can't hear Lachey.
Okay,
There you are.
thank you. I apologize. And so we outside of the fence are African descendants. And right at one particular location, it's like lot number 59, there's a blue flag, and the blue flags are indicating where there are graves. And right where lot 59 is, there is a blue flag. So whoever buys this lot is right on top of the one of the ancestors. And one thing that we've realized from this, am I okay? Something popped up.
Yes.
Okay. And right where the lot 59 is a blue flag. And where that blue flag is, it means they're going to start building right there. And that could very easily be a driveway or a backyard. And we realize that with our city ordinance, as wonderful as it is, we need to add more meat to it. Because one of the great questions was, is there a variance? Is there a distance from where you find a grave? Is it 50 feet, 100 feet? You know, how much protection does this gravesite have from development? Which as of right now, there is none. And then also they're supposed to, the developer is supposed to put a beautiful fence around the gravesite to bring in both the African-American and the Caucasian gravesite together and have it protected and memorialized so that community members are able to go in and visit their loved ones. That has yet to be done. So these are just some of the things that we're seeing that's very important in this conversation, that there are other things that we're not privy to or understood what needed to be done. But these conversations are very much bringing up questions and ideas that needs to be added to this public ordinance.
That's a great point, Lachey, is that this process, while this is a 2-year grant process, it will hopefully serve as the foundation for continued work on policies that will strengthen burial ground protections for years to come. And so it's an education process for all of us. We're all learning, and Charleston really it has the opportunity to lead the way as far as local burial ground protection and policies go. And so we want to use that opportunity to lead well, and so that other communities can follow, because this is an issue faced by communities across the country.
Yeah, so at the end of the session as well, we've been asking people to complete this form. So obviously, since you're all online, we've got an online version of the form as well, which is just to collect information about burial grounds that are important to you, where they're located, the condition of the burial ground, so that we have an understanding of the status of that burial ground if we're not aware of it already. And then whether you're related to someone buried there. And then if you have any suggestions about people that we could contact that might be caretakers of that burial ground, or have shown particular involvement in the maintenance, for instance, of that burial ground, and anything else that you'd like to share. So that's available. Sorry,
but we're also protecting your loved ones. Any names that you give us is not going to be available to the public.
Mm-hmm.
That is only for us ourselves, and your loved ones' information is guarded very protectively.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so here's a QR code to complete the online survey. And perhaps, I don't know, Anna Catherine, whether we could also send out links to the survey as well. Oh, there's a link there in the chat if you can access that.
Oops, there we go. I just made it so everyone can see it.
Okay. And please share that with anyone that you feel like would be interested in contributing as well. We're eager to hear from everyone about these sacred sites.
Yes, and so this concludes the informational recorded portion of today's presentation. So if you're joining us later and you're not watching live, thank you so much for joining. We are going to stop the recording now and open the floor for discussion. But right here we have the links to access the Anson Street African Burial Ground Project's website, as well as the Preservation Society's website, where you can find more information on all of the topics we covered today, as well as additional resources for understanding existing protections for burial grounds locally throughout the state and across the nation. And you can access the survey as well. And please feel free to reach out to any of us with any questions. And thank you so much for joining.